We're halfway through 2023, and Smash Ultimate's meta is still as dynamic as ever. Is Fighter Pass 2 dominating the meta as much as people think? Did the Steve ban in certain regions affect his results? Will Rob be number 1 again? Let's talk about it. Similar to the breakdowns I've done for PG Stats and in the 2022 video, I will be using the same established rules that were set for previous seasons. Our results come from alt rank 2023.1 TTS, so we will be utilizing the tiers already established to break down results. C tier tournaments, which will be the lowest ranked tournaments used, as there are just way too many D tiers with character results sometimes impossible to find, will be represented through the top 8 placements. Next up the scale would be B and B plus tiers, where we'll take the top 16, and then A and A plus tiers, where we'll take the top 32, and then of course finally the S, S plus, and P tiers, the tournaments with the highest accolades and entrants, and we will be taking the results of the top 64. A player must win a single game with a character for the result to count, and if a player pulls out a character in the set but does not win a single game with that character, then it is not counted. Also, consider that some character data is dependent on data recording from tournaments and event runners, and some of it may be incomplete or has a margin of error. Without further ado, let's check out the results. The image on screen showcases a character's placement percentage. A placement percentage signifies the percentage out of all counted tournament results for the alt-ranked 2023.1 season based on the rules laid down earlier. Out of the 82 unique characters in the game's roster, 40 accounted for at least 1% of results, which has historically been a sign of meta relevancy. When compared to the second half of 2022's 43 characters, there is a slight decrease, potentially suggesting there is a slimmer base of competitively successful characters in 2023. Finally, after 3 seasons of dominating the number 1 spot, 5 if you include the online time period, Rob finally falls from the number 1 spot to a measly number 2. To no one's surprise, Steve overtakes that spot, even with active bans in the Midwest, Australia, and parts of South America. As mentioned, number 2 is Rob, and Snake maintains the number 3 spot from last season. Roy, Palutena, Aegis, Wolf, and Joker all maintained their top 10 status from 2022, with the 2 characters dropping from the top 10 being Samus, who is still pretty close at 11th, and Kazuya, who fell out of the top 15 entirely. The new top 5 threat is Cloud, who went up 14 placements between these past 2 seasons. We also see an increase for Diddy Kong's percentage, who returns to the top 10 for the first time since 2021. Okay, let's talk about the controversially strong Fighter Pass 2 characters. For the first time, every Fighter Pass character has made it over 1%, with Sora finally debuting with a rank increase of 10 spots. We'll dig into more why later, but outside of Sora, Steve, Aegis, and Min Min have all had relatively small increases in rank, all somewhere in the top 15. The 2 most intriguing characters though are Kazuya and Sephiroth, who have both seen an overall decrease in activity. As mentioned already, Kazuya went from top 10 and fell out of the top 15, and Sephiroth plummeted harder in results, going from almost being top 10 in 2022 to dropping out the top 20 entirely in 2023. Once again, we will go into more why later when we talk about the biggest increases and decreases in rank and percentage. But first, I want to check in on Fighter Pass 1. These characters, similar to Fighter Pass 2, have mechanically different ways of playing Smash compared to the base roster, most of them, and are still amazing characters with some excellent polish and results that people don't put as much attention on, for the most part. Joker is still top 10, but is just on the edge at that number 10 spot and starting to get a bit outshined by characters who are finally seeing the fruits of labor from buffs later in the game's life, and players fully utilizing these characters' new advantages. Hero is just outside the 1% mark, being pretty close to meta-relevant. Banjo is still Banjo, and pretty much carried by Torigiri in Japan and Wolfen in El Salvador. Terry is still thriving in the 30s and has a solid place in the meta. And lastly, the biggest surprise is Byleth, who had a dramatic increase in results and has now even outplaced Terry, which brings us into the top 10 increases between seasons, because at the very top of the rank change is in fact Byleth. Let's break down how. Byleth was both the number 1 most improved character in rank and number 2 in percentage. He went up not 10, not 15, but 26 spots, breaking into the top 30 entirely. Now this may seem surprising, as if you are a keen viewer of competitive Ultimate, you would know Byleth's top rep, MK Leo, hasn't used Byleth as much as he has in the past 2 years. Thankfully for the character, the rest of the high-level Byleth reps stepped up, especially in Japan. Zayasu stands as the Byleth with the most results for the character, but Noi, Lai, and TKM all bring in multiple results in the Eastern Hemisphere. In the West, Leo still reps the character a fair amount, and has even seen secondary usage from Spargo in Mexico. The character has even multiple results in South America, with Calvaflow and Venezuelan winning a C-tier event. Another character who has seen a huge increase in results is Cloud, who came out as the 7th highest in rank increase and has had the highest total percentage increase, being the only character to jump over 1% this season. So what changed for such an insane increase in percentage? Well, while Spargo is good, and contention for number 1 for the year, one player doesn't carry the amount of results for a character to top 4 in the game. Well, crazy enough, Spargo isn't the Cloud with the highest amount of notable results. He's second. Above him is Yoshi from Japan, with 10 notable results in the first half of the year. But even then, that still doesn't tell the full story. Cloud had 42 different players across the globe contributing to his percentage of results, which is the 3rd largest player base behind Steve and Rob. Out of those 42 players, 24 of those have contributed more than 1 result this season, and now Cloud has rocketed himself as the best sword character in the current meta, and I'm eager to see if this trend of popularity continues into the second half of 2023. Some other characters to take note of are Marth, who was the 3rd largest in rank increase and the 9th largest in percentage, this once again mainly being thanks to Roseasu in Japan, but also now Krieg in the US, Sheik, who was 6th in rank increase and 5th in percentage increase, with AIM in Japan being a huge contributor to the character's results and has made multiple major top 8s so far this year, plus representation from Rox in Mexico, Mr. R in the Netherlands, and Void of course in the States. And of course Peach plus Daisy, who was 9th in rank increase and 8th in percentage increase, due to both Umeki in Japan and Mudace in the US having large pools of attendance and consistently outputting strong performances, and on top of that some numerous successes from Ling. Other characters who made the top 10 in rank change were Duck Hunt, Corrin, Dr. Mario, Incineroar, and as mentioned earlier, Sora. With Kameme continuing success with Sora in 2023, plus new reps in Hikaru in Japan and Rakior from Morocco making waves with the character, Sora is really starting to shine with the rest of Fighter Pass 2. And then on the other column with percentage change, Mr. Game & Watch, Fox, Mario, Diddy Kong, and Olimar were all in the top 10 for increases. That covers the biggest upcomings this season, so it's appropriate that next we cover the downfalls. While we always talk about the characters who thrive, there's always that equivalent exchange where characters see harsh falls. And no other character has seen as negative a fall this season as Pikachu. Yes, we did see Shiny Mark top 8 as super major with the character, but in terms of actual quantity of results, Pikachu has had better years. The rat fell 23 spots in rank for 2022, and is currently at an all-time low at 57 out of 82, and is not over 1% for the first time in Ultimate's offline history, losing 0.55%. Pikachu's most notable players in the US such as Sam and Shiny Mark don't compete as often due to travel, and H4 did not compete as much earlier in the season, but has so after moving to Japan, even winning a Sumbato. Pikachu is seeing more success overseas, such as Noko Bros in Japan, Fried Rice in Australia, and Yeraz in France, all putting up multiple results, but there isn't any player currently driving the character to frequent enough success to keep up with the others in today's meta. Another character who saw a drop-off was Inkling, being 2nd in rank drop and 5th in percentage drop. While we saw the rise of Inkling player Showers in Japan, who as of this video release has the 2nd most Inkling results behind Hiroyuki this year, the character has little much outside of that. Space, one of the top players from Netherlands and a former Inkling player, now prefers Aegis more and more these days. And notable North American Inkling players such as Colorado 8 and Waff have not put up more than 1 result this season. The character is currently in a lull, being upheld by 2 Japanese players, and while it is enough to keep Inkling from sneaking out the top 50, we will see how long that lasts with how close the lower ranks are in results. Another character who saw large negatives in both rank and percentage were Lucina. She fell 16 spots as the 3rd largest rank drop, and with a fall of 0.38%, she's now barely hanging on to that 1% barrier, being the last character before that drop-off. What is probably the biggest proponent in Lucina's decrease in results most likely lays with the inactivity of Lucina's best rep, Proto Bonhomme, who has only entered 2 tournaments in these 6 months. The other character I mentioned with a harsh drop-off earlier was Sephiroth, who dropped 11 ranks and 0.5%. Sephiroth is still a pretty solid character, still in the top 25 and over 1.5% total, but the character is not as used as often anymore by their top reps, Tweak and Ken, and has seen complete inactivity from others like Ned, leading to a general drop. With M4E in Italy starting to break out more with Sephiroth, maybe we'll see an increase over the next half of the year. To fill out the rest of the top 10 rank decreases, Ike, Pichu, Bowser, Ness, Zero Suit Samus, and Donkey Kong all had significant amount of downward trend. And lastly in percentages, Palutena leads with the highest percentage fall, dropping out of the top 5 for the first time ever in Ultimate's lifespan. Then after we have Roy, Samus, Wolf, Rob, and Pokemon Trainer filling out the rest of the top 10. As you can see, a lot of historically strong characters are now seeing overall decreases in usage, and we'll see if they end up bouncing back or if others will continue the trend of changing characters in DLC. That's enough about the quantity of results. Let's now do a deeper dive on the quality of results. Now when it comes to actually winning events, a good portion of Ultimate's cast is taken first at a C tier or above event. 49 characters have at least won 1 event, which is still insane for only the first half of the year. The character with the lowest percentage of results to win an event is Pit, with 2 wins total, one by Silver in Canada, and the other by Bloom Forever in the UK. The character with the highest percentage of results to not win an event in 2023 yet is shockingly Mario, but may I remind you is 12th in percentage of results. When we break down the top 10 in win volume, it really shouldn't come to a surprise that Steve is number 1. But Steve is number 1 by quite a bit compared to his peers. This doesn't completely paint the picture though. As you can see, a decent amount of these wins are under a singular player for their respective majorities. But even when we just look at the diversity of the players, Steve still reigns at the top with 6 different reps taking events, with Kazuya right behind Steve for second, with 5 successful reps taking tournament wins. That being said, this accounts for regionals and majors, and while a majority of characters can win in regional, that doesn't mean every character can top 8 in major. Well, after I say that, it's still even crazier to say that more characters have appeared in a top 8 of a major than actually winning its C-tier above event, with 51 characters having appeared in a major top 8, or helped to at least get a player into the top 8. It should come to no surprise that the number 1 character to appear in these major top 8s is Pyra and Mithra. Sparkle and Shuton make up more than half of the top 8 results for this character, and even then, we have seen 7 different players successfully pilot the duo, whether as their main or secondary, to make top 8. After that would be Steve, who is just mainly Akalo consistently making top 8, or just winning the event outright, and while these characters sit as the top 2, their results do mainly come from the player reps piloting them more than a ton of people finding success. So speaking of player reps, let's compare the amount of players that contributed results to the percentage. On this graph, the line in the middle serves as the average trend line. Characters above the line have results that are generally concentrated amongst a small group of players. These characters that are above and have the farthest distances from the trend line are Roy, Samus, Olimar, Peach, and Ken. Roy has 32 different players representing him this season, but the majority of the results come around a few players, namely Flo in France and Cola and Goblin in the US. Samus is mainly carried by Siski in Spain and Yara in Japan. Olimar is captained by Shuton and Noi in Japan and Dabuz in the US. Peach plus Daisy is serviced by Mutes in the US and Yumeki in Japan. And lastly, Ken, the character not the player, is led by Takara in Japan, who has almost double the results of all the other reps in the field. On the other hand, characters below the line usually have a much wider player base, but fewer players consistently bring in the results. Most notably below the line is Kazuya, Sephiroth, Falco, and Donkey Kong, all characters who have numerous single result reps, which as a sum are overcoming the contributions of even the players with the highest amount of results. The craziest part about the differences between North America, Japan, and Europe is that every region has its own number 1 in terms of placement percentage. Steve is only number 1 in North America, which is ironic because it's also the region with the most places that have Steve banned compared to the other 2. In Japan, the number 1 is actually Rob. Well, technically, Rob and Steve are tied, but Steve has a much higher secondary usage over Rob, so Rob wins the tiebreaker. Then lastly in Europe, Samus reigns supreme by almost 1% over number 2, which again is Steve, and is the most dominant in comparison to every other region's number 1. When comparing top 10s, Steve, Rob, and Cloud are the only characters that overlap in all 3 regions. North America has a pretty similar one to the international scale, but Mario is much more present in their meta, and replaces Diddy Kong in the top 10. Diddy Kong, though, is much more prevalent in Japan, sitting all the way at top 3. Japan also shares Aegis and Snake with the global scene, but also has a bevy of unusual characters sitting in their top 10. Min Min, Olimar, Mr. Game & Watch, and Fox are all uniquely up there to only Japan this season. Europe also has its own unique characters sitting amongst their best. They do have Palutena, Wolf, and Roy in their top ranks, but they also have, as mentioned earlier, Samus at the top, Wario at 3rd, and Greninja and Lucina rounding out the rest. Lucina is the most interesting here. This character was almost not even above the 1% threshold. But as you can see, each region's meta has developed very differently throughout the years. And that covers everything for today. If you're interested in more of my work, I have the articles that I used to do linked in the description, or you could check out the 2022 video I did that covered both Melee and Ultimate storylines and character stats. Also, consider subscribing for future videos and liking to show your support. Thanks, and see you next time.